The stagecoach lurched to a violent stop in front of the general store, and Sarah Zimmerman pressed herself against the worn leather seat, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She had traveled over 2,000 miles from Boston to this dusty corner of Wyoming Territory in the summer of 1878, answering an advertisement for a mail-order bride that had seemed like her only escape from a life that had become unbearable. Her father's gambling debts, the men who came looking for payment, the way her stepmother had looked at her with cold calculation, suggesting there were other ways Sarah could be useful to settle what was owed. The memory still made her stomach turn. "Valentine, Wyoming," the driver called out, his voice gravelly and impatient. "End of the line, miss." Sarah's hands trembled as she gathered her single carpet bag, the only possession she had managed to bring with her. Everything else had been sold or seized. Through the dusty window, she could see the small frontier town spreading out before her, a collection of wooden buildings that looked like they might blow away in a strong wind. Horses were tied to hitching posts, and men in wide-brimmed hats stood in clusters, their eyes turning toward the stagecoach with open curiosity. She had exchanged only 3 letters with Quinn Lancaster, the rancher who had placed the advertisement. His words had been simple, straightforward, promising a home and protection in exchange for companionship and help managing a household. He had mentioned his ranch was prosperous, that he was 32 years old, and that he was an honest man. Beyond that, she knew nothing about the person she had agreed to marry, the stranger who now held her entire future in his hands. The driver opened the door, and the hot Wyoming air rushed in, so different from the humid summers of Massachusetts. Sarah stepped down carefully, her traveling dress already dusty from the journey, her dark hair coming loose from its pins. She had tried to look presentable, but 3 weeks of travel by train and stagecoach had left her exhausted and disheveled. "Someone meeting you?" the driver asked, tossing her bag down without ceremony. "I believe so," Sarah said quietly, scanning the faces of the men nearby. None of them stepped forward. Her anxiety ratcheted higher with each passing second. The driver shrugged and climbed back onto his perch. Within moments, the stagecoach was rolling away, leaving Sarah standing alone on the wooden boardwalk with dust settling around her feet. She felt dozens of eyes on her, assessing, judging. A few men whispered to each other, and she caught fragments of their conversation. "Mail-order bride, I reckon. For who?" Maybe old Lancaster finally did it. Sarah's cheeks burned, but she kept her chin up, refusing to show how frightened she truly was. She had learned in Boston that showing fear only made predators circle closer. A man in a dirty shirt took a step toward her, his smile showing several missing teeth. "You looking lost, sweetheart. Maybe I could help you find what you're looking for." "No, thank you," Sarah said firmly, taking a step back. Her retreat was blocked by a wooden post, and the man's smile widened. "Now, don't be unfriendly. This is a hospitable town." The lady said no. The voice came from behind the advancing man, deep and calm but carrying an edge of unmistakable authority. The man with the missing teeth stopped immediately, his expression souring as he turned. "Just being friendly, Lancaster. Then be friendly somewhere else." Sarah watched as the man slouched away, muttering under his breath. Then the crowd parted slightly, and she got her first look at Quinn Lancaster. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his work shirt. His hair was dark brown, sun-streaked at the edges, and hung just past his collar beneath a weathered Stetson. His face was tanned from long days outdoors, with strong features that might have seemed harsh except for the genuine concern in his blue-gray eyes. He held his hat in his hands now, approaching her slowly, as if afraid he might startle her. "Miss Zimmerman?" he asked gently. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the calluses on his hands, the way he held himself with a careful stillness, like a man accustomed to working with skittish animals. "I'm Quinn Lancaster. I apologize for not being here when the stage arrived. There was trouble with one of the horses, and it took longer than expected to settle him." He glanced at her face, and something in his expression shifted, softened. "You look terrified." The simple, direct observation caught Sarah off guard. She had expected many things, but not such straightforward kindness. Her carefully maintained composure cracked, and to her horror, she felt tears beginning to well up. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It's been a very long journey, and I suppose I'm just tired." Quinn shook his head slowly. "You don't need to apologize for being scared. This is a big step, coming all this way to marry a stranger. I imagine that takes considerable courage." He picked up her carpetbag with one hand and gestured toward a wagon parked nearby with the other. "Come on. Let's get you away from all these staring eyes. You're safe with me now." Those simple words, spoken with such quiet certainty, did what nothing else could have done. The knot of anxiety in Sarah's chest loosened just slightly. She followed Quinn to the wagon, acutely aware of how gentle his movements were, how he offered his hand to help her up without grabbing or presuming. When she placed her hand in his grip was warm and steady. The wagon seat was more comfortable than the stagecoach had been, and as Quinn climbed up beside her and took the reins, Sarah felt herself beginning to breathe more normally. They pulled away from the town center, heading down a dusty road that stretched toward rolling hills dotted with sagebrush and wildflowers. For several minutes, they rode in silence. Sarah snuck glances at Quinn's profile, trying to reconcile this quiet, courteous man with the rough frontier existence she had imagined. He seemed lost in thought, his hands steady on the reins as the two horses pulled them along at an easy pace. "I should explain some things," Quinn said finally, his voice breaking the silence. "My ranch is about 5 miles outside of town. It's a cattle operation mostly with some horses. I have 3 men who work for me, decent fellows who won't bother you. The house itself is not fancy, but it's solid and well maintained." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "When we get there, I want you to understand something important. You'll have your own room. There's no expectation that you'll share my bed until you're ready, if you ever are. I know that might not be what you expected from this arrangement, but I won't have you feeling trapped or afraid in what should be your home." Sarah turned to stare at him fully now, her surprise evident. "But you advertised for a bride." "I did," Quinn acknowledged. "And I hope that eventually we might have a real marriage. But that's something that should grow naturally between 2 people, not something forced by circumstance or obligation." He glanced at her briefly before returning his attention to the road. "I lost my parents 5 years ago to influenza. My father built that ranch from nothing, and keeping it running alone has been the loneliest thing I have ever experienced. I wanted a partner, someone to share the work and the life with. But partnership requires trust, and trust takes time." "That's very unusual," Sarah said softly. "Maybe. But then, I have never been much for doing things the conventional way." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "My mother used to say I was born thinking too much for my own good." Despite herself, Sarah felt an answering smile beginning to form. "My mother said something similar about me, though she passed when I was 12, so I suppose I will never know if she would have changed her assessment." "I'm sorry for your loss," Quinn said, and the sympathy in his voice sounded genuine. They continued talking as the wagon rolled across the open landscape. Sarah found herself gradually relaxing, telling Quinn about her journey west, carefully editing out the worst details of why she had left Boston. Quinn, in turn, described his ranch, his cattle, his hopes of eventually breeding quality horses that could handle the harsh Wyoming winters and the demanding work of ranch life. When they crested a small rise, Quinn pulled the horses to a stop and pointed ahead. "There it is, the Lancaster Ranch." Sarah followed his gesture and felt her breath catch. The ranch house sat in a natural depression, protected from the worst winds by the surrounding hills. It was larger than she had expected, a sturdy two-story structure built from pine logs, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. Several outbuildings dotted the property, including a large barn painted red, corrals with good fencing, and what looked like a bunkhouse for the ranch hands. Trees had been planted around the main house, young but growing well, providing shade and a touch of green against the brown prairie. "It's beautiful," Sarah said, and she meant it. "It's home," Quinn replied simply. "And now it's your home too if you want it to be." As they approached, Sarah could see a man emerge from the barn, wiping his hands on his trousers. He was older than Quinn, perhaps in his 50s, with a graying beard and a weathered face. He raised a hand in greeting as the wagon rolled into the yard. "That's William Foster, my foreman," Quinn explained. "He worked for my father and knows more about cattle than any man I have ever met. The other two hands are probably out checking the south pasture. You will meet them at supper." Quinn brought the wagon to a stop near the porch and immediately hopped down, coming around to offer Sarah his hand again. This time she took it with less hesitation, allowing him to help her down. Her legs felt unsteady after so long sitting, and she was grateful for the support. William approached with a respectful nod. "This must be the young lady you have been expecting, boss." "William, this is Sarah Zimmerman." "Sarah, William Foster has been keeping this place running while I went into town. He is also the best cook among us, though that's not saying much." William chuckled. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Zimmerman. I hope the journey was not too difficult." "It was long," Sarah admitted, "but I'm very glad to be here. William, would you mind taking care of the horses? I want to show Sarah the house and let her get settled before supper." "Of course, boss. Take your time." Quinn picked up Sarah's carpetbag and led her toward the porch. The stairs were solid beneath her feet, and she noticed the railings had been sanded smooth, the kind of attention to detail that spoke of a man who took pride in his work. Quinn opened the front door and stepped aside, allowing her to enter first. The interior was dim after the bright sunshine outside, but as Sarah's eyes adjusted, she found herself impressed. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. Furniture that looked handmade but sturdy filled the space, chairs with cushions, a long table that could seat 8 people easily, shelves lined with books and simple dishware. Everything was clean, well-maintained, though it clearly lacked a woman's touch. No curtains softened the windows, no decorative items brightened the mantel. "It's not much," Quinn said, sounding almost apologetic. "It's wonderful," Sarah countered. "I have seen wealthy homes in Boston that felt cold and empty. This feels lived in, cared for." Quinn looked pleased by her assessment. "Let me show you upstairs." He led her up a narrow staircase to the second floor, where a short hallway connected 3 doors. Quinn opened the first one, revealing a bedroom that was simply furnished but spacious. A large bed with a thick quilt dominated the space, and there was a dresser, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, and a window that looked out over the front yard toward the distant hills. "This was my mother's room," Quinn explained. "My father could not bear to sleep here after she passed, and I have kept it prepared, hoping someday it would be used again." He set her carpet bag down near the dresser. "The room beside this one is mine. The third is just storage for now. There's a door between your room and mine, but it locks from your side. I want you to feel secure here, Sarah. Truly secure." Sarah walked to the window, looking out at the view. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. She had never seen such an expansive sky, such open country. It was both intimidating and exhilarating. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for understanding, for being kind. I was so afraid during the journey, afraid of what I might find when I arrived. You have been more considerate than I had any right to expect." Quinn moved to stand beside her, though he maintained a respectful distance. "I think we have both taken a leap of faith here. I want to make this work, Sarah. A real partnership, a real marriage eventually, if that's what grows between us. But there's no rush. We have time to get to know each other." They stood together in comfortable silence for a moment before Quinn cleared his throat. "I will let you rest and freshen up. Supper will be ready in about an hour. If you need anything, just call out. I will be downstairs." After he left, closing the door softly behind him, Sarah sank onto the edge of the bed and let out a long, shaky breath. The mattress was comfortable, far better than the hard benches and cramped spaces she had endured during her journey. She looked around the room at the simple furnishings and clean surfaces, and felt something unfamiliar beginning to grow in her chest. Hope, perhaps. Or maybe just relief that she had not made a terrible mistake. She opened her carpet bag and pulled out her few belongings. The spare dress that was even more worn than the one she wore, the nightgown that had been mended multiple times, the small Bible that had belonged to her mother. It was a pitiful collection, evidence of how far her circumstances had fallen. But Quinn had not looked at her with pity or disdain. He had looked at her with respect, with kindness, as if she were a person of value rather than a burden or a commodity. Sarah washed her face and hands in the basin, pinned her hair back more securely, and changed into her slightly less dusty dress. By the time she made her way downstairs, voices were coming from the kitchen area. She could hear Quinn talking with someone, discussing something about fence repairs and a cow that might be sick. When she entered the room, she found Quinn at the stove with two other men seated at the long table. They all stood immediately when they saw her, a courtesy that seemed natural rather than forced. "Sarah, these are my other hands," Quinn said, gesturing to each man in turn. "That's James Mitchell, and beside him is Thomas Webb. Gentlemen, this is Sarah Zimmerman." James was young, probably not yet 25, with sandy hair and an eager, friendly face. Thomas was closer to Quinn's age, quiet and serious with dark hair and watchful eyes. Both men greeted her politely, and Sarah felt herself relaxing further. These were working men, rough around the edges perhaps, but respectful. William came in from outside, and the five of them sat down to a meal of beef stew, fresh bread, and canned peaches for dessert. The conversation flowed easily around the table, the men discussing the day's work, plans for the coming week, a rumor that rustlers had been spotted 2 counties over. They were careful to include Sarah, explaining things when ranch terminology became too specific, asking about her journey and her impressions of Wyoming. "It's so open," Sarah said, trying to find words for the vastness she had witnessed. "In Boston, you are always surrounded by buildings and people. Here it feels like you can see forever." "That openness can be deceptive," Thomas said quietly. "Easy to get lost if you do not know the landmarks. Weather can change fast too. Blizzards in winter can be deadly." "Thomas is right," Quinn added. "That's why it's important you do not wander off alone until you know the land better. If you want to explore, I will take you out, show you the boundaries of the ranch. teach you what to watch for." Sarah appreciated the lack of condescension in his voice. He was not forbidding her from moving freely, but rather offering to help her do so safely. After supper, the ranch hands excused themselves to the bunkhouse, and William went to do a final check on the horses. Quinn and Sarah worked together to clear the table, falling into an easy rhythm as they washed and dried the dishes. "Your hands have been very kind," Sarah observed. "They are good men. I pay fair wages and treat them with respect. In return, they work hard and stay loyal." Quinn dried the last plate and set it on the shelf. "That's how I think things should work. People do better when they are valued. Not everyone shares that philosophy. No, they do not. But I have found that ruling through fear or intimidation only breeds resentment. My father taught me that." Quinn hung the drying cloth on a hook and turned to face her. "You must be exhausted. I should let you get some rest." Sarah was tired, bone-deep tired from weeks of travel and anxiety, but she found herself reluctant to end the evening. "Will you tell me about your parents? You mentioned they passed from influenza." Quinn's expression grew somber but not closed off. He gestured toward the chairs near the fireplace, and they settled in, the dying light from the window casting long shadows across the room. "They were good people," Quinn began. "My father came west in 1855, when this was still raw territory. He worked for other ranchers, saved every penny, and eventually bought this land for almost nothing. He built the first cabin himself, then brought my mother out from Missouri. She was a teacher, educated, and everyone thought she was crazy for marrying a cowhand with nothing but dreams and calluses." He smiled at the memory. "But she loved him, and she loved this land. She taught me to read and write, made sure I understood there was a world beyond cattle and horses. My father taught me how to work, how to treat people fairly, how to build something that would last. They sound wonderful. They were. When the influenza came through in 1873, it swept through Valentine like wildfire, lost nearly 30 people in town, and my parents were among them. They got sick within days of each other." His voice grew quieter. "I was 27 years old and thought I had all the time in the world to tell them how much they meant to me. Then suddenly they were gone, and the words were trapped inside me forever." Sarah reached out instinctively, placing her hand over his. "I understand. My mother died suddenly too. One day she was fine, the next day she collapsed. The doctor said it was her heart. I was only 12, and there were so many things I wanted to ask her, things I needed to tell her." The silence she left behind was deafening. Quinn turned his hand over, gently clasping hers. "I am sorry you lost her so young. That must have been very difficult." It was. "And my father remarried within a year to a woman who saw me as competition for his affection and his money." Sarah stopped, realizing she was revealing more than she had intended. "You do not have to talk about it if it pains you," Quinn said gently. But Sarah found that she wanted to talk about it, wanted to share the burden she had been carrying alone for so long. "My father was never a strong man, and after my mother died, he became weaker. He started gambling, losing money we could not afford to lose. When the debts became too large, men started coming to the house. Dangerous men. My stepmother suggested that there were ways I could help settle those debts." She swallowed hard, the memory still sharp. "That is when I saw your advertisement in the newspaper. It seemed like providence, a way out, a chance at a different life." Quinn's hand tightened around hers, his expression dark. "Those men, they did not hurt you, did they?" "No. I left before it came to that, but I knew it was only a matter of time." She met his eyes directly. "I want to be honest with you, Quinn. I did not come here because I was seeking adventure or romance. I came here because I was running away." "I know," Quinn said simply. I could see it in your letters, in the way you wrote about wanting a fresh start. And I do not care, Sarah. Whatever you were running from, it does not matter here. You are not that frightened girl anymore. You are a woman who made a difficult choice and had the courage to follow through with it. That takes strength. Sarah felt tears pricking at her eyes again, but this time they were not tears of fear or despair. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of hope that maybe, just maybe, she had found a place where she could finally breathe. "Thank you," she whispered. They sat together as the last light faded from the sky, hands clasped. Two people who had been strangers that morning beginning the tentative process of becoming something more. The days that followed established a rhythm that Sarah found both comforting and challenging. She woke early each morning to the sound of Quinn moving around downstairs, starting the fire and putting coffee on to boil. At first, she rushed to join him, not wanting to seem lazy or unhelpful. But Quinn gently encouraged her to take her time, to adjust to the altitude and the dry air that was so different from what she was accustomed to. "The ranch has been running without a woman's presence for 5 years," he reminded her. "Another few days will not make a difference. Let yourself settle in." But Sarah was not the type to sit idle. By the end of her first week, she had taken over most of the cooking, much to the delight of the ranch hands who had grown weary of their own limited culinary skills. She cleaned and organized the house, finally adding those feminine touches that had been missing with curtains sewn from fabric Quinn brought back from town, wildflowers in mason jars on the table, and a thorough scrubbing of every surface until the house gleamed. Quinn watched her efforts with a mixture of appreciation and concern. One evening, after she had spent the entire day doing laundry and hanging it to dry in the hot sun, he found her collapsed in a chair on the porch, her face flushed and her hands raw from the harsh soap. "Sarah, you are going to work yourself into exhaustion," he said, settling into the chair beside her with 2 glasses of cool water from the well. "I want to be useful," she replied, accepting the water gratefully. "You brought me here to help, and I need to earn my place." "You do not need to earn anything. You already belong here." Quinn was quiet for a moment, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Why do you feel like you have to prove your worth, not just here but in general?" "I have noticed it in the way you apologize for things that do not require apologies, the way you push yourself past reasonable limits. Who made you feel like your value was contingent on constant productivity?" The question caught Sarah off guard, cutting through to a truth she had not fully acknowledged even to herself. "My stepmother, I suppose. After my mother died, I was constantly told I was a burden, that I needed to earn my keep. If I was not working, I was wasting space and resources." She took a sip of water, the coolness soothing her parched throat. "I know it sounds foolish, but those messages become ingrained after years of hearing them. It is not foolish, and for what it is worth, I want you to know that your value has nothing to do with how much work you accomplish. You could sit on this porch all day reading books and you would still belong here." Quinn set his glass down and leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I want a partner, Sarah. Not a servant, not a housekeeper I had to marry to make respectable. A partner. That means your thoughts matter, your feelings matter, your needs matter, just as much as mine." Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of a knot she had not realized was there. "I am not accustomed to that. Then we will both learn together. Because I am not accustomed to having someone to share decisions with, to consider another person's perspective. I have been alone for so long, making all the choices myself. This partnership goes both ways." As the weeks passed, Sarah began to understand what Quinn meant. He consulted her on household decisions, asked her opinion on matters ranging from what crops to plant in the small vegetable garden to whether they should invest in more cattle or focus on horse breeding. He taught her to ride, starting her on a gentle mare named Daisy, patiently explaining how to sit properly, how to guide the horse with subtle movements rather than harsh jerking of the reins. Their rides together became a cherished part of Sarah's day. Quinn would take her out in the late afternoon when the work was done, showing her different parts of the ranch, teaching her to read the landscape the way he did. He pointed out where the best water sources were, which plants were safe and which were poisonous, how to tell if a storm was approaching by watching the clouds and feeling the shift in the wind. "The land will take care of you if you learn to understand it," he explained one day as they sat on a ridge overlooking a valley where cattle grazed peacefully. "But it is not forgiving of ignorance or carelessness. You have to respect it." "I think I am beginning to understand that," Sarah replied. She had gained confidence in the saddle, no longer clinging to the pommel with white-knuckled terror. "There is a rhythm to life here, a connection to natural cycles that you just do not have in the city." "Does that mean you are adjusting, finding your place here?" Sarah turned to look at him, this man who had become so important to her in such a short time. "I am. More than I thought possible. When I left Boston, I felt like I was fleeing into the unknown, grasping at straws. But this feels like more than just an escape now. It feels like coming home." Quinn's face lit up with a smile that transformed his usually serious expression. "I am glad, very glad." Their relationship continued to deepen, though Quinn remained true to his word about not rushing physical intimacy. They had not even kissed yet, though Sarah had caught herself thinking about it more and more often. The way Quinn looked at her sometimes, with warmth and growing affection in his eyes, made her heart race. The accidental touches when they worked side by side in the kitchen sent electricity through her body. But Quinn was patient, respectful, waiting for a sign from her that she was ready for more. That sign came on a warm evening in late July, nearly 2 months after Sarah's arrival. They were sitting on the porch after supper, as had become their custom, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The ranch hands had retired to the bunkhouse, and the night was quiet except for the chirping of crickets and the occasional lowing of cattle in the distance. "Quinn," Sarah said softly. "Yes, do you remember what you said when I first arrived? About hoping we might eventually have a real marriage," she felt rather than saw him tense slightly beside her. "I remember. I want that too." Sarah turned in her chair to face him directly. "I know we have not discussed it explicitly, but I feel like we have been courting these past weeks, getting to know each other, building trust. And I want you to know that I trust you now, completely." Quinn reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, and cupped her face gently in his hand. "Are you certain? There is no rush, Sarah. We can take as much time as you need." "I am certain." She leaned into his touch, her eyes meeting his in the dim light from the window behind them. "I did not think it was possible to feel this way, to care for someone so deeply in such a short time. But you have been kind and patient and good. You have made me feel valued and safe. And somewhere along the way I fell in love with you." Quinn's breath caught. "You love me." "I do." The admission felt both terrifying and liberating. "Sarah Zimmerman, I have loved you since the day I watched you stand up to that fool outside the general store with your chin raised and fire in your eyes despite being scared half to death." Quinn leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "May I kiss you, please?" The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid of breaking something precious. But as Sarah leaned into him, her hand coming up to rest against his chest where she could feel his heart pounding, the kiss deepened. It held all the longing and affection that had been building between them, all the words they had not yet spoken, all the hope for the future they were building together. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me. Properly, I mean. I know we have the arrangement, the papers that say we are already married for legal purposes. But I want to do it right. I want to stand before witnesses and make vows that mean something, vows I choose rather than words on a contract. I want everyone to know that you are my wife not because of some advertisement, but because we chose each other." "Yes," Sarah said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They planned the wedding for 2 weeks later, wanting to give themselves time to prepare but not wanting to wait too long. Sarah sent a letter to a cousin in Boston who had been kind to her, inviting her to come if she could, though she knew the distance and expense made it unlikely. Quinn spread word around Valentine, inviting the townspeople who had become friendly with Sarah during her weekly trips to town for supplies. The preparations kept Sarah busy and happy. She sewed herself a new dress from beautiful cream-colored fabric that Quinn insisted on buying, working by lamplight in the evenings while Quinn sat nearby reading or working on ranch accounts. William's wife, who Sarah had met in town, came out to the ranch to help with the more intricate needlework, and the two women formed a fast friendship. "Quinn Lancaster is a good man," Margaret Foster told Sarah as they worked together on the dress. "My William has known him since he was a boy, watched him grow up. He has always had a kind heart, even when kindness was not the easy choice. You are fortunate to have found each other." "I know," Sarah replied, carefully stitching a seam. "Every day I wake up grateful that I found his advertisement, that I had the courage to answer it. My life could have gone in such a different direction." "The Lord works in mysterious ways," Margaret said with a smile. "Sometimes the path that seems the scariest is the one that leads us exactly where we need to be." The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, clear skies and warm sunshine. Quinn had arranged for the ceremony to take place at the small church in Valentine, with the celebration to follow back at the ranch. Sarah dressed carefully in her new gown, her hands trembling slightly as she fastened the buttons. Margaret had helped her with her hair, pinning it up in an elegant style with small wildflowers woven throughout. When Sarah came downstairs, Quinn was waiting in the main room, dressed in a new black suit that made him look both handsome and slightly uncomfortable. His eyes widened when he saw her, and he seemed momentarily speechless. "You look beautiful," he finally managed. "Absolutely beautiful. You clean up rather well yourself," Sarah teased, feeling shy despite their growing intimacy over the past weeks. They rode into Valentine together in the wagon, this time with Sarah sitting close beside Quinn, her hand resting on his arm. The church was small but well-maintained, and as they arrived, Sarah was touched to see that many townspeople had indeed come. Faces she recognized from her trips to the general store, the couple who ran the bakery, even the sheriff who had helped her once when a drunk had been bothering her outside the post office. Her cousin had not been able to come, but to Sarah's surprise, she had sent a package that arrived the day before. Inside was her mother's wedding ring, which Sarah had thought lost forever. The accompanying letter explained that Sarah's father, in a rare moment of clarity and decency, had given it to the cousin for safekeeping, saying it should go to Sarah when she married. Sarah had cried when she opened the package, overwhelmed by this unexpected connection to her mother. The ceremony itself was simple but moving. The pastor, an elderly man with kind eyes, spoke about love and partnership, about two people choosing to walk through life together through whatever challenges might come. When it came time for the vows, Quinn took both of Sarah's hands in his and spoke clearly, his voice steady and sure. "Sarah, I vow to honor you, to cherish you, to be your partner and your friend. I promise to listen when you speak, to consider your needs as equal to my own, to build a life with you based on respect and trust. I promise to love you not just today, but every day that follows, in good times and in bad, for as long as we both shall live. Sarah's voice wavered slightly as she spoke her own vows, but the emotion behind the words was unmistakable. Quinn, I vow to stand beside you, to support you, to be your partner in all things. I promise to bring my full self to this marriage, to communicate honestly, to work through challenges rather than running from them. I promise to love you with all my heart, to build a home and a life with you, for as long as we both shall live. When Quinn slipped his mother's wedding ring onto Sarah's finger, and then Sarah slid her mother's ring onto his, there was not a dry eye in the small church. The pastor pronounced them husband and wife, and when Quinn kissed Sarah, it was tender and sweet and full of promise. The celebration back at the ranch was joyful and relaxed. The ranch hands had set up tables outside, and townspeople brought food to share. Someone produced a fiddle, and soon there was music and dancing in the yard. Sarah found herself passed from partner to partner as the men took turns twirling her around, though Quinn kept pulling her back, clearly reluctant to let her stray too far. As the sun began to set, and the guests started heading back to town, William pulled Quinn aside. Sarah, watching from across the yard, saw the older man clasp Quinn's shoulder and say something that made Quinn nod seriously. Then William gave him what looked like a small package before walking away. "What was that about?" Sarah asked when Quinn returned to her side. Quinn's ears turned slightly red. "William giving me what he called essential advice for a wedding night, along with a bottle of his private whiskey reserve in case I needed liquid courage." He looked embarrassed but amused. I assured him I would be fine without detailed instructions, but he insisted it was his duty as foreman to make sure I did not mess things up. Sarah laughed, feeling her own nervousness about the night ahead easing. "Well, we have managed to figure out most things together so far. I imagine we can handle this too." "Together," Quinn agreed, pulling her close. "Everything together from now on." When the last guest had departed, and the ranch hands had tactfully retired to the bunkhouse early, Quinn and Sarah found themselves alone in the house that was truly theirs now. They stood in the main room, suddenly shy with each other despite the kisses and affection they had shared over the past weeks. "Would you like some of William's whiskey?" Quinn asked. "For courage or celebration or both? Maybe a small glass for celebration." Sarah settled into one of the chairs by the fireplace while Quinn poured. Her new dress rustled as she moved, still feeling special and beautiful. Quinn handed her a glass and sat beside her, and they sipped the smooth whiskey in comfortable silence for a few moments. Finally, Quinn set his glass aside and turned to her. "I want you to know that tonight, tomorrow, every night, you are in control. We only do what you are comfortable with, and we go at whatever pace you need." His expression was earnest, sincere. "I know you came from a situation where you did not have much control over your own life. That changes now. With me, you always have a choice." Sarah set her own glass down and reached for Quinn's hand. "I know. That is one of the reasons I feel safe with you. You have shown me through your actions, not just words, that you see me as an equal partner." She took a deep breath. "And right now, what I choose is to go upstairs with my husband and start our married life properly." Quinn's eyes darkened with desire, but his movements remained gentle as he stood and offered her his hand. They climbed the stairs together, and when they reached the landing, instead of going to her room as she had every previous night, Sarah let Quinn lead her into his. Their room now, she realized. The room they would share as husband and wife, What followed was tender and careful, with Quinn taking his time, making sure Sarah felt cherished and desired rather than used. There were awkward moments, inevitable with new lovers learning each other's bodies, but there was also laughter and whispered endearments and a growing sense of connection that went beyond the physical. When they finally came together, it felt right, like the natural culmination of everything that had been building between them since that first day when Quinn had told her she was safe. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, Sarah's head resting on Quinn's chest where she could hear his heart beating steady and strong. "Are you all right?" Quinn asked softly, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "I am better than all right. I am happy." Sarah tilted her head to look up at him. "Thank you for being patient with me, for letting me come to this in my own time. You never have to thank me for treating you with respect. That should be the baseline, not something worthy of gratitude." Quinn kissed the top of her head. "Though I am grateful too. Grateful that you chose to trust me to build this life with me. I love you, Sarah Lancaster." Sarah's heart swelled hearing her new name spoken with such affection. "I love you too, Quinn, more than I thought possible." They drifted off to sleep wrapped in each other's arms, secure in the knowledge that they had truly become partners in every sense of the word. The months that followed were some of the happiest of Sarah's life. She settled fully into her role as the rancher's wife, finding joy in the daily rhythms of ranch life. She proved to have a natural talent with the horses, and Quinn began teaching her more about breeding and training. They worked side by side, whether it was mending fences, checking on cattle, or managing the household accounts. In September, they made a trip to Cheyenne to register some new breeding stock and to purchase supplies for the coming winter. It was Sarah's first time in the territorial capital, and she was wide-eyed at the size of the city, so much larger than Valentine, though still nothing compared to Boston. "It is strange," she told Quinn as they walked down the wooden sidewalk past storefronts and saloons. "I left Boston seeking escape, but I do not miss it at all. This feels more like home than anywhere I have ever lived." "That is because home is not about the size of the buildings or the number of people," Quinn replied. "It is about being where you belong with people who value you." They stayed in a hotel that night, a rare luxury, and Sarah felt sophisticated getting dressed for dinner in the hotel restaurant. But as nice as it was, she found herself eager to return to the ranch, to their real life. Winter came early and hard that year. By November, snow was already piling up, and temperatures dropped well below freezing. Sarah learned about the brutal realities of Wyoming winters, the constant work required to keep animals alive and safe, the way the cold could seep into your bones no matter how many layers you wore. One particularly harsh night in January, a blizzard struck with terrifying intensity. The wind howled like a living thing, and snow fell so thickly that Sarah could not see the barn from the house. Quinn and the ranch hands worked through the night, moving cattle to sheltered areas, and making sure the horses in the barn had enough feed and water. Sarah kept the coffee hot and made food that the men could eat quickly between trips outside. When Quinn came in near dawn, his face was crusted with ice and his clothes were frozen stiff. Sarah helped him out of his coat and boots and wrapped him in blankets by the fire. "Lost 3 head," he said grimly through chattering teeth. "Found them too late, already frozen." "But you saved the rest," Sarah countered, pressing a cup of hot coffee into his hands. 3 is far better than it could have been. My father once lost 50 head in a storm like this. That was the winter before they built the new barn, before we had the shelter we have now." Quinn sipped the coffee gratefully. "Still, every loss matters, I know, but you did everything humanly possible. That is all anyone can do. When spring finally arrived, bringing with it thawing snow and the first green shoots of new grass, Sarah felt as if the whole world was being reborn. She worked alongside Quinn to plant the vegetable garden, much larger this year than the small plot they had maintained the previous summer. She had plans for preserving and canning, for making the ranch more self-sufficient. It was in April that Sarah began to suspect she might be pregnant. Her monthly courses had always been irregular, so she did not think much of missing one. But when she missed a second and began feeling queasy in the mornings, she started to wonder. She confided in Margaret Foster, who came out to visit one afternoon. "Could be," Margaret said with a knowing smile. "You have that look about you. When are you going to tell Quinn?" "I want to be certain first. I do not want to get his hopes up if I am wrong." But by May, there was no doubt. Sarah's body was changing in undeniable ways, and she knew she needed to tell Quinn. She chose an evening when they were alone on the porch, watching the sunset as they did most nights. "Quinn, I have something to tell you." He turned to her immediately, alerted by something in her tone. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am fine. Better than fine, actually." Sarah took his hand and placed it on her stomach, which was still flat but would not be for much longer. "We are going to have a baby. Sometime in late November or early December, I think." Quinn's expression went through several changes in rapid succession. Surprise, joy, fear, wonder. A baby. "We are going to have a child." "Yes." Sarah watched his face anxiously. "Are you happy about it?" "Happy, Sarah, I am terrified and thrilled and completely overwhelmed. But yes, happy does not even begin to cover it." Quinn pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break. "You are going to be a mother. I am going to be a father. We are going to have a family." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer. Sarah tired more easily and had to cut back on some of the heavier ranch work, much to her frustration. But Quinn was adamant that she not overexert herself, and he had the ranch hands take over tasks that might be too strenuous. "I am pregnant, not an invalid," Sarah protested after Quinn gently but firmly stopped her from helping to move hay bales. "I know. But I also know that you would work yourself to exhaustion rather than admit you need rest, so I am going to be the cautious one for both of us." Quinn softened his words with a kiss. "Please, Sarah, let me take care of you. Let us take care of you." As her belly grew and the baby's movements became stronger, Sarah found herself growing excited rather than frightened. Quinn read everything he could find about childbirth and infant care, determined to be prepared. He built a beautiful cradle during the long summer evenings, carving delicate designs into the wood. In September, they received unexpected news. A letter arrived from Boston, forwarded through Sarah's cousin. It was from a lawyer, informing Sarah that her father had passed away from heart failure. But the surprise came in the second paragraph. Her stepmother had left town years ago, and Sarah's father, in his final days, had managed to pay off his debts and leave a small inheritance. It was not a fortune, but it was enough to make a difference. "He remembered me at the end," Sarah said softly, staring at the letter. "I did not think he would." "Perhaps he wanted to make amends," Quinn suggested, "to give you something after failing to protect you when you needed him." "Maybe." Sarah folded the letter carefully. "I would like to use the money for the baby. Set it aside for education, for opportunities." "That is a fine idea, and generous, considering what you went through. Holding on to anger would not change the past, and I have so much to be grateful for now. This life, this home, you." Sarah placed Quinn's hand on her swollen belly, and they both felt the baby kick. "Our child. I want to focus on that, on the future we are building." As November approached, Sarah grew increasingly uncomfortable. The baby was large and active, and she felt as though she carried a small watermelon everywhere she went. Margaret had agreed to attend the birth, as had the doctor from Valentine, though the roads were already becoming treacherous with early snow. The contractions started on a gray afternoon in late November. Sarah was folding laundry when the first one hit, a tightening across her belly that made her gasp. By the time Quinn came in from checking the southern pasture, the contractions were coming regularly, and Sarah was pacing the main room, breathing through the pain. Quinn went pale. "It is time. The baby is coming." "Yes," Sarah gritted out. "You need to get Margaret and send someone to town for the doctor." The next several hours were a blur of pain and effort. Margaret arrived quickly, calm and capable, guiding Sarah through the process with steady encouragement. The doctor arrived just as things were becoming urgent, and Sarah was too focused on the work of bringing her child into the world to feel anything but determination. Quinn stayed by her side throughout, letting her grip his hand hard enough to leave bruises, murmuring encouragement and love even when Sarah snapped at him in her pain. Finally, as the sun was setting and casting orange light through the bedroom window, Sarah gave one final push and heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Her baby's first cry, strong and healthy. "It is a boy," the doctor announced, quickly cleaning the squalling infant. "A fine, healthy boy." Quinn had tears streaming down his face as he looked at his son for the first time. "Sarah, you did it. He is perfect. You are perfect." Margaret placed the baby in Sarah's arms, and she looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and absolutely beautiful. The baby had stopped crying and was looking up at her with dark blue eyes that would probably change color in the coming weeks. "Hello, little one," Sarah whispered. "I am your mama and this is your papa, and we are so very happy you are here." "Have you chosen a name?" Margaret asked softly. Sarah and Quinn looked at each other. They had discussed names endlessly over the past months, but had not been able to settle on one. Now, though, the choice seemed obvious. "Henry," Sarah said. "Henry William Lancaster, after Quinn's father and William Foster, who has been like a father to Quinn." "Henry," Quinn repeated, reaching out to touch his son's tiny hand. The baby's fingers immediately curled around Quinn's much larger one. "Welcome to the world, Henry. We have been waiting for you." The ranch hands came by one at a time over the next few days to meet the new arrival. William held the baby with surprising gentleness for such a rough-looking man, his eyes suspiciously bright. James and Thomas took turns standing guard, as they jokingly called it, making sure Sarah and Quinn had everything they needed while they adjusted to life with a newborn. Those first weeks were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Henry was a good baby, healthy and strong, but he still needed constant care. Sarah and Quinn took turns walking the floor with him during the long winter nights when he would not settle. They changed endless diapers and marveled at every tiny development, the first smile, the way his eyes focused more clearly, the grasping of his little hands. "I never knew I could love someone so much so quickly," Quinn said one night as he rocked Henry near the fireplace. "Looking at him, I understand what my parents felt, why they worked so hard to build something lasting. It is not just about us anymore. It is about giving him a foundation, a legacy." Sarah watched her husband and son together, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "We have built something good here, Quinn. Something worth protecting and passing on." Winter passed into spring, and Henry grew rapidly, becoming more alert and engaged with the world around him. By summer, he was crawling and getting into everything, requiring constant supervision. Sarah wore him in a sling while she worked in the garden, and Quinn built a sturdy playpen that could be set up in the shade, so Henry could be nearby during outdoor chores. One afternoon in July, nearly 2 years after Sarah had first arrived in Valentine, she found herself standing on the ridge where Quinn had first brought her riding. She held Henry in her arms, pointing out the cattle in the valley below, the mountains in the distance, the vast sky overhead. "This is your home," she told her son. "This land, this ranch, this family. Your father and I built this for you to give you roots and stability and love." Quinn rode up beside her, dismounting to stand at her side. "He is getting so big, soon he will be riding his own horse." "Not too soon," Sarah protested with a laugh. "Let him learn to walk steadily first." They stood together, the three of them, looking out over the ranch that had started as a desperate escape and become a true home. Sarah thought about that terrified woman who had stepped off the stage coach 2 years ago, hardly believing she would find safety, let alone love. "What are you thinking about?" Quinn asked, slipping an arm around her waist. "How far we have come, how much has changed." "I arrived here broken and afraid, and you helped me become whole again." Sarah leaned into him. "You gave me safety first, then friendship, then love. You gave me a home and a family and a life I never dreamed possible." "You gave me those things too," Quinn countered. "I was so lonely before you came, Sarah. I had the ranch, the work, but I did not have a real life. You brought warmth and laughter and purpose back to this place. You made it a home again." Henry babbled happily, reaching for a butterfly that fluttered past, and they both laughed at his earnest expression. "Should we have more?" Sarah asked suddenly. "More children, I mean. I have been thinking about it. Henry should have siblings, brothers and sisters to grow up with." Quinn's face lit up. "I would love that. A whole house full of children, if we are blessed with them, though maybe we should space them out a bit more than my parents did. My mother used to tell stories about having 3 children under the age of 4 and barely surviving the chaos." "Spacing sounds wise," Sarah agreed with a smile. Over the next several years, their family did grow. A daughter they named Emma Rose came along when Henry was 3, a calm and thoughtful child who was the opposite of her energetic brother. 2 years after Emma came another boy, Michael, who proved to be the most mischievous of the 3 and kept Sarah constantly on her toes. The ranch prospered as well. Quinn's horse breeding program began to pay off, producing animals that were sought after throughout the territory. They expanded the cattle operation and built a new bunkhouse to accommodate additional hands during busy seasons. Sarah's garden became legendary in Valentine, producing enough vegetables that she could sell the surplus at the general store. Through it all, Sarah and Quinn's love deepened. They faced challenges together: drought one year, a particularly brutal winter the next, the inevitable accidents and illnesses that came with ranch life and raising children. But they faced it all as true partners, supporting each other, making decisions together, building the life they had both dreamed of. On a warm evening in August of 1885, 7 years after Sarah's arrival in Valentine, the whole family gathered on the porch after supper. Henry, now 6 and tall for his age, was telling his younger siblings a wild story about seeing a bear near the creek. Emma, 4, listened with wide eyes while 3-year-old Michael climbed all over his father, unable to sit still. Sarah watched them all with deep contentment. She was 30 now, Quinn 39, and they were in the prime of their lives. The ranch was thriving, their children were healthy and happy, and they had built exactly the kind of partnership they had both hoped for. "You ever regret it?" Quinn asked quietly, echoing a conversation they had not had in years. "Leaving Boston, coming out here to marry a stranger?" Sarah pretended to consider the question seriously. "Well, the journey was uncomfortable, and I did arrive absolutely terrified. And that first week, I was not entirely sure I had made the right choice." "Only the first week, maybe 2 weeks," Sarah amended with a teasing smile. "But from the moment you told me I was safe with you, I started to believe that maybe things would be all right, and I was correct." This life, this family, is everything I never knew I needed. So no, I do not regret it for a single moment." Quinn leaned over to kiss her, ignoring the exaggerated groaning sounds from their children. "Best decision I ever made, placing that advertisement. Second best decision was being patient enough to let you come to trust me in your own time. The best decision we both made was choosing each other every single day since then," Sarah corrected. "Love is not just about the big romantic moments. It is about showing up, doing the work, building something together day after day." As the sun set over the Wyoming landscape, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and gold, the Lancaster family sat together, secure in the knowledge that they had created something lasting. Henry would eventually take over the ranch, with Emma and Michael making their own paths while remaining connected to the land and family that had shaped them. But that was far in the future. For now, there was just this perfect moment. Children laughing, the warm evening breeze, the touch of her husband's hand in hers, and the deep satisfaction of knowing she had found her place in the world. Sarah thought back to that terrified young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach, desperate and frightened and hoping for nothing more than basic safety. She wished she could go back and tell that Sarah what awaited her. Not just safety, but love. Not just survival, but a life filled with purpose and joy. Not just an escape, but a homecoming. Quinn squeezed her hand, and she looked up to find him watching her with that same expression of love and devotion he had shown her every day since they had truly become husband and wife. "What are you thinking about now?" he asked. "Everything," Sarah replied. "And nothing. Just how grateful I am to be exactly where I am with exactly who I am with. Just thinking that sometimes the scariest journeys lead us to the most beautiful destinations." "I will always be grateful you were brave enough to take that journey," Quinn said softly. "And I will always be grateful you were patient enough to wait for me to arrive, in every sense of the word." The children eventually ran off to play in the yard before bedtime, their laughter carrying on the evening air. Sarah and Quinn remained on the porch, watching the stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky. Two people who had started as strangers brought together by circumstance and had become partners, lovers, parents, and best friends. Their story had begun with fear and desperation, with a young woman fleeing the only life she had known and taking a chance on a future she could not predict. It had been built through patience and kindness, through choosing each other day after day, through the hard work of building trust and love from the ground up. And it had become something beautiful, something lasting, something worth every moment of fear and uncertainty that had come before. Sarah had arrived terrified, believing she was running away. But Quinn had been right from that very first day. She had been safe with him. And in finding safety, she had found everything else that mattered: home, family, purpose, and a love that would last all their days. As night fell over the ranch and the children were tucked into their beds, Sarah and Quinn climbed the stairs to their own room, hands linked, still talking quietly about the day's events and plans for tomorrow. It was ordinary and perfect, exactly the life they had both dreamed of but hardly dared to hope for. And in the years that followed, through all the joys and challenges that life brought, through watching their children grow and eventually start families of their own, through growing old together on the land they both loved, Sarah and Quinn never forgot how their story began. With courage, with kindness, with a promise of safety that became a foundation for everything else. They had built a legacy together, not just in the thriving ranch or the family that carried on their name, but in the love they had created and sustained through deliberate choice and daily commitment. It was a love story for the ages, born in the wild Wyoming Territory, nurtured through patience and understanding, and lasting long into their golden years as they sat together on that same porch, watching sunsets and counting their blessings, and knowing that they had found in each other exactly what they had been searching for all along. The end.